Okay, weekly review for the week of January 13th. Try to go through this fairly quickly as I usually do. I'm also going to include RTY in this week's review just because I think there is an opportunity there for a reversion trade if we have a very specific setup that comes into play. Otherwise, I'm not interested in it, so I'll go through that too. So just to kind of recap, ES last week was tricky. Tricky for me at least because we got what I was looking for initially right out of the gate. We got continuation Monday. We had a strong overnight session following the strong triple distribution trend day higher that we had on Friday. We left these terrible overnight lows, which ultimately became a target for later in the week. But following this day on Friday, this triple D up with the POC into the high, very indicative of continuation the next day, which is what we got, which is exactly what I wanted. And then jobs reports came out, and then the remainder of the week was mostly sells, which obviously was not the continuation that I was looking for by any means. So challenging week in the sense of tested my ability to flip, which I didn't really. I was still looking to see if we could put in some decent lows. I didn't take a ton of short trades last week, which was my failing. I still did fine. I still had a good week, but I missed some opportunities for sure because I wasn't really looking to sell it because at the time we were still into weekly lows, still into balanced lows. And I wasn't necessarily looking for, as much of a sell as we got until Friday, until, we had that nice sell into the lows. We finally took out 22s in the target here, and then we took out the weekly low, prior weekly low, close below the balance range that we actually set. So, and again, even in this mess here, and even on Friday, we actually had some really nice long trades. Even though we liquidated in the session, we had a really nice low put in here initially and got some decent points on the long side here. So conviction bias the last couple of weeks has been a little challenging for me because I haven't necessarily been looking for, the giga sell that, everybody else is apparently looking for in here. So I've mostly just been trying to take this day to day, but from a larger, higher time frame perspective, we've maintained the uptrend. We've maintained decent lows. The tape itself has been a little murky to me, but it's been, still fairly responsive. We've had some really nice opportunities, obviously, on the long side as well, basically the last couple of weeks, especially Friday and Monday, for that matter. We had some really nice opportunities on the long side. So going into this week, fairly neutral, but obviously a couple things here have happened that we have to be conscious of, which could certainly take us lower. So we had a very weak close on Friday, unfortunately. I was looking to really see if we could, keep this close above 70s, 75s, to keep us within that prior daily balance range. Obviously, we didn't do that. So the primary thing I'm watching is basically the meat of Friday's distribution, to keep it simple. So prior daily balance lows are these 74s area, this lower part of this distribution. If we can't accept above this, if we can't accept over 75s, if we can't find buyers over 75s, either early in Globex or in early in RTH, in the RTH open, I think the likelihood of this low holding is low, and we're probably going to come back down and fill the gap. This is the bottom of the November 6th election gap from the Trump election. I think we'll finally see this get filled if we can't find buyers pretty early and get us back above 70s. So if we see real weakness, if we see real strong selling, or if we just see a ladder that evaporates and there's no bid on it, then the area that below this that I'd pay attention to and I'd look for as a target would be 5780s. So this is September POC and October val overlapping down into the extreme low priced in for the week, which is around 5770s, 5760s, somewhere in here. So basically this range down here. If we can't accept 80s early, the first thing I'd be looking for, 70s early, looking for the move down to fill the gap into 22s. And then, if we see a lot of weakness coming in, then I'd be looking all the way down here into 5780s, down into 5760s. On the flip side of that, and again, trying to stay fairly neutral here coming into this week, especially considering we have data, market moving data later in the week early in the sense of Tuesday, Wednesday, but Monday's pretty open. If we find buyers early above 75s, then I would be looking for the test of last week's value up into 30s. So I think if we can find some strong buying above 70s, if we see, some size on market that doesn't get Instamet on the offer and starts to free that up a little bit, I think we're looking probably at a back test of 20s, 20s to 30s, up into the meat of last week's distribution up here. So that'd be what I'm looking for on the upside. And then if we can get above, find buyers above, like we start to squeeze above 27s, I'd be looking for last week's POC. And then, into the expected high range, and then all the way potentially up back into 5980s, which is back into these major moving averages, the 50-day and the 20-day converging down here. So I think the potential for a squeeze is there, considering how aggressive some of the selling was into the lows. I think if we do start to find buyers back above 30s, I think we get to 50 very quickly, and I think we could accelerate pretty fast and move back through last week's value fairly quickly if we see some aggressive buying. So that's what I'll be looking for. Again, pretty neutral in the view, I'll say, and just kind of gonna have to work off of like how the week opens and how we look going into Monday on the RTH session. NASDAQ is really, really simple for me. All day on Friday, we saw a heavy bid down into 900s, and then we saw a pretty aggressive buyer market step in at 900 to 930, start to sweep the book pretty aggressively back up, which obviously we saw that squeeze back up. We actually closed back within balance, those prior balance, daily balance range, which is actually down here. So we closed above 980s, which is good. But I think the big thing I'm looking for is if we test down into 900s early, is that buyer still there? And do we see that bid start to fill again? And do we see them start to get aggressive at market and take us back up early? Or is that or are they gone if they, have they left the chat, and do we liquidate below this? Because I do think if we start losing basically last week's low you can use, if we start losing that low, I think it's a liquidation. I think we'll finally puke it more so than we did. And I'd be looking down into 20,680s and potentially as low as 20,550s. I don't think there's anything in between here that bids. I really think it would be probably a pretty fast move down into 680s if we lose last week's low. So that's what I'll be looking for in the NASDAQ if we can't find a bid there early. On the upper end of the range, again, I'm going to keep it really simple. If this buyer is still here, if we can find some more aggression down here as well, I'm going to move back. I'm going to look for the move back up into 160 to 190, back in the upper part of Friday's range. And I think if we're above this, we can squeeze pretty fast. I think we get to 350. 350 is more likely 500s relatively quickly if we're getting above 190s. If we're finding buyers above that. In the middle of this, I'm not interested at all. So going to keep it simple. Going to look basically use last Friday's range as the gauge, and look how we trade around these extremes, and I'll keep it as simple as that. And I think that's the easiest way to look at this. RTY, I'm going to include this one too. I don't trade RTY very often. I only really trade this when we're at major inflection points on higher time frames. We're at one right now, so I do think this is worth looking at. This is the equivalent of IWM basically holding 216s, but we're basically right at the 200-day moving average. Again, we're closing outside weekly value. So the big thing that I'm going to be looking for here is it's as simple as, can we hold 2180s? Do we hold a sweep of last week's low down into 2180s? And do we find some buyers down here? If we do, or if we can continue to hold basically the lower end of Friday's distribution the lower end of Friday's value. If we can find buyers down here, then I'll look for the move, the reversion trade back up into 2220s. And then ideally, I'd like to see that have a decent reaction and basically get back up into 2250s. That would be the ideal trade. If we could see it, if we'd see a decent buyer step in here, see if we can get the full reversion trade, and clip, probably almost 100 points to the upside, get back into the meat of the distribution that we put in last week on RTY, and then kind of see from there, right? RTY and smalls are pretty fickle. I find them difficult to trade, to be honest. I don't look at the book as much at all on them, so it's not a vehicle I'm usually trading. But when we're trading around major long-term moving averages like the 200-day, as well as a higher time frame level of support that we're looking at that's important on weekly, monthly time frames, I'll certainly keep it in mind. And if this starts to set up, then that's exactly what I'll look for. If we start selling below this, I have no interest. I won't touch it. So it's really the only thing I'm looking for in RTY is if we sweep out this area, or if we can basically hold this and push us back up into 2250s. I think that's probably worth some risk on the book, but otherwise I'm not going to touch it. So I'm going to keep it there. It's about 10 minutes. Yeah, I don't have much else to add. The only things I'd say here too is that we have a lot of data. We have bank earnings coming out as well. So Tuesday we have PPI, Wednesday we have CPI, and then Wednesday morning we also have JPM, Citibank, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs reporting. Thursday morning we have TSM, UNH, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, a couple other banks as well, and jobless claims as we usually do. So just things to keep in mind, which is also why I say that this week's going to be a little bit more, just continuation of volatility. We have a lot of data coming out. We have big market moving data. We have bank earnings, which are going to be a really good gauge for everything else that's about to come. So that's it.